Imagine if the secret to a sustainable future wasn't hidden in a high-tech lab, but in something as small as a single cell. Something you might find in your morning sourdough bread or your favorite craft beer. What if solving some of our biggest environmental and food challenges starts with yeast? Today, we're getting microscopic. We're talking about yeast. Not just the kind that makes bread rise or beer bubble, but the kind that could help brew biofuels, create natural flavours, or even clean up oil spills. Our guest, Claudia Bruinsma, is a microbiologist, a PhD candidate, and a biotech entrepreneur who is literally hacking yeast to unlock its hidden superpowers. From her rural farming roots to pioneering lab discoveries, Claudia is on a mission to show us how these tiny fungi are nature's ultimate innovators. So whether you're a science enthusiast, a foodie, or just curious about the future of sustainability, get ready to see yeast in a whole new light. Welcome to Emerging Tech Unpacked, a podcast that unpacks emerging tech topics and careers with diverse perspectives. Today, we have a special episode sponsored by the CSIRO On Innovation Program to profile an incredible scientist who is translating big ideas into real-world impact. My name is Lucy Lin, and today I'm so excited to hack yeast with a microbiologist. Welcome to another episode of the Emerging Tech Unpacked podcast. My name is Lucy Lin, and today we'll be talking about how we can harness the power of yeast for sustainable innovation with our expert, Claudia Bruinsma. Welcome to the podcast, Claudia.
Thanks, Lucy. I'm excited to be here and chat all things yeast sustainability and science meets startup.
Yay, I'm so glad you're here and love your background, by the way. The ones that can see it on YouTube, this is Claudia's own personal plant collection. Is that right? How many plants do you have?
This is a shelf of my personal plant collection. I probably have over about 500 plants in my sunroom.
Wow. Okay, so you're a microbiologist and a plant lover as well. I love it. All right. Well, let's start from the beginning because not only are you a plant lover, you are also currently studying for a PhD and you are a PhD candidate in microbiology at the University of Newcastle. And you're from a farming family and you grew up on a large farm. Now, you told me your farm was a hobby farm, but it's actually quite large. Is that right?
Yeah. Moving around, we've downsized to about 102 acres. So to some people, that's a large farm, but to my grandparents, that's a hobby farm.
Oh my gosh, that sounds massive. I can't even tell you how big that is, but it sounds very large. So, can you tell me your link to science from a farming background?
I guess growing up on a farm gave me a strong appreciation for how much we rely on the natural world and just how important it is to understand it. I guess farming taught me to pay attention to patterns, think critically, and just, find practical solutions when things don't go to plan.
Mm. And like, you grew up on I'd say, a fairly large farm. And how does that shape your perspective in terms of science, maybe even agriculture and innovation?
Well, I guess farming itself is an innovation. So you're constantly adapting to changing conditions, and the mindset of resilience and experimentation makes science feel, I guess, familiar. Just with a few more microscopes, I guess.
Can you tell us about the microscopes and also some of these innovations in agriculture?
Yeah, well, microscopes, because microbiologists can't unfortunately see them with the naked eye, but I guess when it comes to innovation, it's like the greenhouses and how we create these microclimates and, make food. Like our land is getting older and unfortunately it doesn't grow crops like it used to, so we have to come up with new ways to make food for everyone.
Yeah, and just letting everyone know, this is the fourth time that Claudia and I have tried to schedule our podcast recording because she currently still lives on a fairly large, well, very rural area, I would say, and there's been a lot of rain and floods where we are in our state, and you were flooded in, which, must be devastating for farmers as well, wouldn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, not flooding in on one occasion, on two occasions within a space of a month, which is unheard of. But I was very fortunate to not be impacted where I am, but a lot of farms went under and a lot of livestock and cattle were swept out to sea, which is really sad to see.
Mm. And how do I guess, like, how do farmers have to survive when it comes to huge weather conditions like floods? And we've got lots of drought in Australia as well. Like, you talk about innovations in agriculture. Can you tell us a little bit more about survival when that happens?
Yeah, I guess it's a hard one because you don't know, and there's no way to prepare for it, especially with our ever-changing climate now. It's like, how can you predict that your property's going to go under in like twice in the space of a month? But I guess it's more so of having, okay, I'm now in a situation that's dire. There's a fire or a flood or there's a drought. How can I protect myself and my livestock? And depending on your situation and where you live, there's no one size fits all, unfortunately.
Yeah, I definitely feel for the farmers and feel for the weather conditions, etc. And, and also, for anyone who's going through all this now. Can you share a memorable story, maybe from childhood, being on the farm, that really sparked your interest in biology or the natural world? I'd love to hear more about growing up on a farm.
Yeah, I was one of those kids that used to pick up rocks and rotting piece of wood just to see what was underneath. Like there was always like bugs, beetles, worms, and it's just was so crazy to me that I could move this stone that's probably been untouched for who knows how long, and there's a whole little ecosystem happening underneath there. And it's just something, and that's just stuck with me my whole life is that curiosity of, how nature works and why is it there, and trying to find out the reasons for that.
Yeah, and are you someone who's constantly turning rocks, in a park, on a beach, on the street?
Yeah, I love a good rock pool. Rock pools are always exciting. But
Oh,
yes,
really? What's in a rock
yeah.
pool?
You find the crabs, the starfish, the shells. Like it's just fun turning over a rock, and there's just something there that moves. It's exciting.
Oh, well, I think you're always deemed to be a microbiologist by the sounds of your, curious nature. Can you tell us a little bit more about what a microbiologist is and, what do you actually do on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I study the microscopic life, like yeast and bacteria, the things that we can't see. And day to day, I might be culturing them, so growing them up. I do a lot of DNA work in the lab, so that means constructing new and improved organisms to make cool things, and designing experiments to understand how these organisms behave and adapt.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. So you wear a lab coat, you're walking around the labs and you're doing all these things. What is the most fun thing that you like doing?
I really like microscopy. Like I like looking underneath a microscope. I actually had the opportunity to do something called SEM last year, which is a scanning
Okay.
electron microscope. And I could see up to like 20,000 times. So it made my yeast, something that you can't see from the naked eye, look like a cat. Basically, I could see every single wrinkle, scar that was on a single organism. It was so fun. It was so cool.
Wow. So you can actually I haven't really looked into a microscope for a long, long time since my maybe science in high school. Can you tell us a little bit more about microscopes and what you see? I mean, I can't believe you can see 20,000 times. That's incredible. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that microscope I was talking about is a very, very expensive machine, and it uses electrons that bounce off a metal to be able to really zone in on the particles of the organism. But an everyday microscope does about 100 times, which just uses lights and like a concave mirror to do reflect and refract, so it bounces off the different objects underneath the lens. It's kind of like
Yeah.
wearing glasses, but imagine if the glasses were like 20 centimeters thick.
And you can see 100 times. That's incredible.
Yeah.
What pursued you or what motivated you to be in this line of work, to be a microbiologist? Is your agricultural background an influence, you think, in this decision too?
Well, I actually studied a Bachelor of Biotechnology and I went in with a mindset of I wanted to be a plant scientist. I wanted to work in the greenhouse, try and make crops more resilient to things like salts and droughts. And it was actually a little bit of an accident that I fell into microbiology. I did my undergraduate during COVID, so that meant I basically taught myself from home and I missed out on a lot of opportunities of going into labs and meeting academics. It wasn't until just after COVID, after the second lockdown, I was in my third year and I just met someone who was just so enthusiastic about microbiology. I kind of followed them into the wonderful world of microbes.
How do you I'm always curious, like, because COVID was really difficult for most people, but it must be so hard for a scientist who needs to be in a lab, to be able to do the work that you do. How do you study, like, from home and not go into a lab and actually, use these incredibly advanced machines that you can look at 20,000 times? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, you don't, unfortunately. So a lot of my learning was done like my lecturers and professors would go in and film little videos and how to actually in one of my classes, one of the academics gave us a flash game of how to streak a petri dish. Didn't work very well, but I appreciated the effort just to kind of, get the concept in your mind of this is how we do it. But yeah, it wasn't really until my third year of my undergraduate degree that I got to go into the labs and start practicing in real life, I guess.
Yeah. It's so interesting when you've got professions like scientists, obviously health staff, carers, you have to go and you have to do. And yeah, retail workers, hospitality, like, you have to go to work. It's easier for me, I guess I'm podcasting, office worker, I could do this remotely anywhere. But definitely it would be really hard from a studies perspective, I can imagine. So let's talk about yeast. This topic I think is absolutely fascinating. We're calling it hacking yeast. So, can you tell me a little bit more about yeast? I mean, number one, the two things that I know about yeast is that I've been on enough beer brewing tours and factories around the world to know that yeast is definitely a very important ingredient in my alcohol. And at the same time, like I had so many friends who were amateur bakers during the pandemic and baking sourdough. And I know that yeast also was a very important ingredient there. But can you tell us a little bit more about yeast and the incredible things that it could do?
Yeah. So yeast are my organism of choice. Anyone out there who's a microbiologist is probably going, she's mad.
Why?
That's because they're eukaryotes, so they're actually closer related to us than they are to bacteria. So yeast are single cell fungi, kind of like the mushrooms that you see, but like a really one little cell. They're nature's tiny powerhouses. So as you mentioned, beer and bread. They can also produce things like fuels, pharmaceuticals, and other materials, even like scents and edible flavors even. They're like,
Yeah.
yeah, like a microscopic factory.
Yeah, I was listening to something and I was reading something and it said I think there's a lab in Harvard and they're creating ancient flower scents. Is that true? You can also create different scents from the past, etc.
Yeah, so scents are a little bit more complicated, like perfumes are a little bit complicated, but people have just recently found out how they can do it. It's not my kind of niche, but I know it is possible and it is really exciting.
Yeah. So, for the listeners who are not familiar, can you tell us a little bit more about hacking yeast? What does that mean? And what kind of transformations that is possible?
Yeah, so I guess hacking yeast, it means like reprogramming or guiding selective breeding yeast to do new things, like for example, produced a biofuel instead of alcohol that you find in your beers. Like wild yeast, for example, are especially interesting, like yeast you just find out in the environment, because they're evolved unique abilities that we can now harness to create everyday things.
How do you get biofuels from yeast? Like, how?
Yeah. So yeast already make ethanol. And I don't know if you ever gone to the petrol station and you see plus 10% ethanol. That
Yeah.
is biologically made from yeast. Uh,
Oh, wow.
yeah, so biochemical pathways are very complicated things, but there are ways that you can slightly change a direction and they can produce something completely different, which are like the building blocks to creating something like diesel or petrol for that matter.
Yeah, amazing. And you've told me previously that yeast can also be used for ice cream flavors. Is that true?
Yeah, of course. Vanillin or vanilla is a really common one. It's a high value product, and natural vanilla takes a really long time to grow. People have found out how to make that using yeast. So, vanilla ice
Wow.
cream from a yeast probably doesn't sound very appetizing,
Yeah.
but is really exciting.
It's amazing, like, how you can just use one thing and then you can modify it into so many different use cases for it. I know you said that it's, nature's wonder, what did you call it? Nature's wonder, like,
I
or,
don't know.
wonder plant, I'm gonna call
Oh,
it one
nature's tiny powerhouse.
nature's tiny powerhouse. I love it. I'm gonna remember that one. So, how do you go about actually collecting, all this yeast from the environment? Where does it actually come from?
Yeah, so yeast are everywhere. They're on you and me, they're in the air, they're on the flowers, they're in the fruits, they're everywhere. But the way that I've done it previously is collecting something that has been rotting or something that has just finished fruiting and fallen on the ground. That's where I generally find the organisms that or yeast that I'm interested in, but they are absolutely everywhere.
Mm. And when you say they're everywhere, are they in the air? Are they on the actual, organisms, etc.?
Yeah, they're inside, outside, they're in your gut, even for that matter. Like they are absolutely everywhere. Same as bacteria. I guess bacteria are the more common microbe that people probably think about
Mm,
when you think about germs and stuff like that. But
mhm.
yeast also fall in that category. So absolutely everywhere.
Wow, okay. I know that there's a few bodily things that yeast is also part of. So, okay, I think I understand. And I read that you are also very involved with brewers, curious individuals, and also citizen scientists. Like, because science is everywhere, yeast is everywhere. Can you tell us a little bit more about what citizen scientists are, and how do you also involve everyday people to kind of collect this information, help you with your research, and what impact does that have on your discoveries potentially?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with a story. In 2021, Australia did their first ever biodiversity kind of report looking at everything that's in Australia, how many levels of things are. And they said that the microorganisms are unknown because there are not enough people looking for them. And that's simply because you can't just see them. You can't just walk in the park and go, "Oh, that's an orchid," or "Oh, that's a kingfisher bird." You actually have to have specialized equipment to find the microorganisms. So what we did a few years ago is we went to a place called Woodford Folk Festival and we gave a little bit of a talk and we actually went out into the environment and collected things like fruit, bark, and soil, took those away, took out all the yeast and other organisms, and brought it back and showed the citizens what they found. So the way that citizen scientists can get involved are through just everyday universities. A lot of universities just advertise them, but there's also programs like iNaturalist, which is a really handy identification tool to have in your pocket. Where if you're on a walk and you're like, oh, that's a cool looking mushroom, take a photo of it and it gets put onto a map, and people who are knowledgeable in that field will go, okay, this is that, and you may actually be helping their research further in that case. iNaturalist has a whole bunch of citizen science here in Australia. USyd, the University of Sydney, does a really cool one around Christmas time about Christmas beetles, for example, but it also can be used for bioremediation and looking for diseases like the myrtle rust that has been damaging a lot of the East Coast. Taking a photo of that and uploading it to a program like iNaturalist alerts the proper authorities to come and deal with that infection.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So it's for everyday people like myself who are not is not a scientist and I want to contribute to science. And then you're saying that I can be out on a hike as an example and I go, oh, and you're taking various photos of the plants and then you can upload it and that's my contribution to science. Is that right, Claudia?
Yeah, that's correct. With microorganisms, it's a little bit more complicated than that, where it has to be in partnership with a university who is studying it. And they're like, we had a whole kit and stuff ready to send out to people and then, take it, bring it back. But for anything else that you can visually see, it's a
Mm.
really good way. Even if you don't have to, upload it for a scientist to see, you could just upload it so you know what that is, and you could just at the same time be helping someone with their research.
Yeah, amazing. And is this a global, it's a global initiative that anyone in the world can do?
Yeah, I think it started in the USA, but it is worldwide. And it's really fun just scrolling around on the map if you have an interest in something and seeing where else in Australia or around the world that thing pops up. It's really
Mm.
cool.
Has there been any like fun examples you've seen that has helped you with your research at all?
Not my research specifically, but everyone's really into the ghost fungi at the moment.
Oh, what's
Time
that?
of year. They're a bioluminescent fungi that grow on the side of trees. I actually stumbled across some because of iNaturalist, so I looked it up on their little search and I found places near me that other people have seen it growing and I was able to go see it myself.
Oh, wow. So it's very, very interactive by the sounds of it. It's interaction science as well. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I might have to download it and go see if I can see a ghost fungi. That's pretty cool. You also mentioned previously to me that yeast also contributes to sustainability and decarbonization. Can you tell us a little bit more about that as well?
Yeah, so wild yeast, or yeast as we know, can ferment sugars and make beers and breads, but that ability to ferment different sugars and tolerate tough conditions like environmental conditions or produce valuable things like biochemicals, all of these in case can help industries replace fossil fuels and reduce waste. So if we find an organism, for example, at a a mine or something that has just naturally evolved to eat coal or eat some sort of contamination, we can then take that back to the lab and make it suitable to then become a superhero in the bioremediation of that chemical or oil spill or whatever that may be.
Wow. Okay. That's really fascinating. Can you go a little bit more detail in terms of how you can identify that as an oil spill, as an example?
Oil spills are a really good one. So there are a couple of chemicals there. Benzene is a really big one, a really good example. If everything in nature can be made by nature, is something that we really try when we talk about what I do is what we try and how we try and teach people. I'm trying to think of a way to describe this without being too complex.
Yes, please. No jargon, ideally.
Yeah. So basically, if you go to a place like that has been contaminated, like a mine, for example, where there has been continuous oil spills or
Mm.
use of heavy machinery and heavy metals, organisms always find a way. So you can take a sample of that spill or where those heavy minerals are, take them back to the lab and try and see if there are any organisms that are living or eating it. Once you find something, which is really not that hard, they're actually, this is real life, this happens every day. We find organisms that can do this. It's then seeing if they have the abilities to be able to be upscaled and combat any spills elsewhere outside of their original climate. So that's where the adaptability and stuff comes from. Can I then take this organism, grow up a heap of it, and then go tackle an oil spill out on the Pacific Highway or something, for example? Does that make sense?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. So you're taking one example from one scenario and see if you can also replicate it into a different like, from a mine to say a highway site to maybe even oil spill in the ocean or something
Yeah.
like that. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so finding a source or somewhere that has been continually contaminated, taking or mapping the microbiome or the microorganisms that live there, seeing if any of those are contenders to become, I guess, the superhero for fixing that problem elsewhere where we may not want that contamination to be.
Mm. Gosh, there's so many things about yeast. I had no idea you could do that too. Like, Can see why you are in so in love with this incredible little powerhouse, nature's
Yeah.
powerhouse. Going back to your agriculture, so how do you see the intersection of traditional agriculture and also emerging biotech that you're studying? And I'd love to know how it shapes the future of food and sustainability as well.
I guess by bridging together traditional knowledge and modern tools, we can grow food smarter, reduce inputs, and unlock nature's own solutions to climate and sustainability challenges. So, again, that comes from taking something from those harsh environments and seeing if it can fix that environment. David Attenborough actually just released a movie. It's in cinemas at the moment about the oceans, and he talks about how the ocean can heal itself. If we leave it alone, it will heal itself. And that all starts down at the natural microbiome reverting and overcoming its challenges. I believe that can happen here on land as well. I do in my field is I kind of accelerate that. So I give it the helping hand that it needs to be able to rebuild these environments and bring them back to what they were. But in terms of food, we're running out of arable land, so land that we can farm on. So coming up with ways to grow food, whether that be in a greenhouse or on a field, is going to be a forever challenge. Microbes can, be used as nutrients, but they can also be used as shields to protect our crops from these harsher environments like iron in the soil, for example, or heavy salts in the soil. It's very
Mm. Yeah, no, I think so. And I love how you reference David Attenborough. He's such a legend, isn't he?
He's such a legend.
You talked about traditional knowledge. Can you explain that a little bit more? Like, yeah, how does traditional knowledge also help with the future of food?
Yeah, just, we're on Aboriginal land. They were farmers prior to when we came here, and they had a way of looking after the land that benefited the land. Unfortunately, when we colonizers came to the land, they kind of they brought their livestock that which really damaged a lot of our land, and they didn't realize that they were actually reversing all of the hard work that the indigenous owners did. So, just going back to our roots of our land and using those skills that those people learnt all those many hundreds of years ago and bringing them back and using modern technologies as well, I think is a really powerful way to not only help ourselves but reconnect our relationship with nature.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love how you talk about how we're using ancient wisdom, but you're also using modern technology to really exacerbate that and make it, much better for our food. And I also worry about the future of food, to be honest. Like, there's I've done an episode about indoor vertical farming and, instead of growing out on hundreds of acres of land, but what about growing upwards, like a tower indoor? And then, had also released an episode about insect farming and robotics as well. So I think food is really important. It's an important topic because if we don't have something to eat, then the world isn't going to survive. And I love this side of things, looking at it from a microbes perspective and how we can also improve our food this way as well, which I think is really important. Now, I'd love to hear some of the challenges because, I know that there's a lot of challenges in this area of what you're researching too, especially from a technical and scientific perspective. How hard is it to be working with yeast in comparison to maybe a traditional laboratory strain?
Yeah, so in with yeast, we've kind of domesticated an organism, like one yeast, and that's Saccharomyces cerevisiae. That is your brewers, your bakers, your everything yeast. So once you go outside that scope and start looking at other yeast, the things that we have developed and the tools that we use don't work anymore. And these organisms become really unpredictable. They don't behave like the lab strains that we've trained do, so standard protocols don't always apply. It's like training a wild animal versus a domestic one. So I always say Saccharomyces is like the Labrador and wild yeast or other yeasts are like the wolves of, the microbiology world.
Right. So you've got a domesticated dog type yeast, and then you've got a wild wolf type yeast, and you're trying to make things from both these type strains.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess the Labrador or the domesticated yeast is the vehicle or the chassis, as we like to call it, that utilizes the abilities that we get from the wild yeast and brings them forward, because it is very predictable. It is something that we know how to control. We know how to make it grow, but it doesn't have the genetic diversity and the cool traits that the wild organisms do. So
Mm,
that's where, they come hand in hand,
mm.
and they work together in a way.
Mm. So with the domesticated type one, have we already gotten all our use cases from them, assuming that's where the beer and the bread and the etc. Like, we know how to use those yeast for thousands of years now is very well. But then the wild yeast is where the potential can come from. It could be, the biofuels, the scents, etc.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and how do you respond to, because what you're doing, like the topic is called hacking yeast. How do you respond to the concerns that when people think about, well, what you're doing is you're modifying some of these strains, and it could lead to potential unintended ecological or health consequences because these are modified strains of what you're trying to do, and you're releasing them into the environment. What do you say to people around that?
Yeah, and I 100% back people who have skepticism and are worried about it, because it is a real concern. It's good for science to have that pushback, really. We address it by being transparent. We work within guidelines and validating our work through partnership and also peer reviewed. So, a lot of the organisms, yes, I've used bioremediation examples in this podcast episode, but a lot of them don't make it into the environment. They're very protected in a fermenter or in some sort of enclosed space and don't actually make it into our ecosystems.
Okay. And how I guess, like, how safe is that? Like, do you have, like, I don't know, 7 layers of lock and keys that won't come out, or how does that work in terms of safety?
That's a really good question. At the end of the day, the things that I'm doing, the things that we're doing, it's not COVID. It's not going to make you sick. The strains that we're using have no pathogenic properties, so they're not going to harm you or I or any animals or plants. I guess when we were talking prior to the podcast, I used a cane toad as an example as how we've tried to fix a problem and then created a problem. That
Mm.
is something that we're actively aware of and something that we are trying to avoid. So we put, I guess, destroy switches in these organisms, or something that, we have the ability to kill them instantly from, putting a liquid on them or putting heat on them or UV. Like, they're very fragile, and if they aren't kept in their right handy conditions, they do not survive. So that's kind of something that people are already implementing in before trying to use these in a everyday life scenario.
Okay. Yeah. So they're not like an invasive species like a cane toad when you brought in to kind of solve one issue, and then now they're a massive issue in a completely different setting, and you can't get rid of them now. And they're poisonous and they're ugly. Um, have you ever faced pushback from regulators? And, like, you kind of referenced that just now. It's like, and from the scientific community, because what you're doing here, I think, is super fascinating. And there's so many different use cases from sourcing, experimenting with wild yeast. But how do you also face some more of these concerns, like besides being transparent and, be able to maybe put that kill switch on?
There are so many rules. So one thing that has held Australia back, which is a good thing but kind of sucks at the same time, is that our biosecurity laws are so strict. So Australia has actually fallen a little bit behind the curve in the world of biotechnology, or precision fermentation, some people call it, because of how strict our laws are here. There are these technologies being used in other countries. Singapore is a massive hub. Germany has a massive hub, and also America has a massive hub. So it's interesting from being in Australia, watching these other countries kind of do it first, and
Mm,
we are learning from them, and we are making sure that our technology is, going to be okay and meets
mm.
all of these guidelines before it even reaches to a market or a commercial kind of product, I guess.
Yeah. It's so interesting how you talk about that because you are, leading and you go and be more risky, or you're kind of like, okay, I'm going to be a lot more safer and regulated, etc. And you kind of like fall a little bit behind, which is what, you're saying as well. How do you strike that balance between innovation but also safe?
Yeah, I guess treat biotechnology like medtech, medical technology. There's about a 10-year lead time before an idea that has proof of concept at a lab scale gets into our health systems. Biotech is the exact same thing. It goes through so many rigorous testing, trials, and whatnot. It is a slow process, again, like medtech, but the outcomes and the outputs of that are so good. Like it's worth the wait.
Mm. Okay, I didn't know it was taking 10 years as well. I know that med tech, definitely health tech, definitely takes at least 10 years. There's a previous episode all about antimicrobial resistance, and Dr. Christine was telling us all about that. Check that out if you'd like to listen to that episode as well. But it's great to hear, like, it's interesting to hear that biotechnology is the same thing. Is that just in Australia or is that worldwide as well?
I can't speak for the regulations in other countries, but I'm pretty sure it's worldwide. No one wants to hurt people on purpose. Well, I hope not.
Mm,
So a lot of people want to make sure this is right. Even if you're just using it for a facial cream, you want to make sure it's not going to have any adverse side effects. It's same with any medication that comes on the market. The chemicals that you put in things matter. So it takes a lot of trial and testing to make sure that it's perfect.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad to hear that as someone who uses face cream, so So what's your take on the idea of biohacking? Know that, talking about biotech here, the title is called Hacking Yeast, so I have to talk about biohacking. Even something as benign as yeast, could this be a slippery slope into something more controversial like genetic modification? I think we touched a little bit about this, especially in humans.
Yeah, so biohacking or genetic modification or GMO can sound scary, but it's a spectrum. What we do with yeast is tightly controlled and grounded in environment benefit and ethical purpose. And ethics and purpose more than hype, but when you think about it, DNA is in everything. So, for full transparency, I modify DNA. We're made of DNA, the plants are made of DNA, all animals, microorganisms are all made of DNA. Doesn't matter where you come from, what color your hair is, how many toes you have, we're all got DNA. So there are obviously concerns about people taking this technology and using it for no good or taking it too far. Designer babies is a big term that a lot of people throw around. I think the world is pretty against that, but at the same time, the same with AI, I guess, for example, there's no way to predict or to harness it right now, but it is something that's in the back of everyone's mind. I, for example, don't work with anything to do with humans just because it does absolutely terrify me. And I only make things that are, I guess, material like fuels because I do not want to have any part in I guess, the genetic modification of humans, for example. There are good reasons to genetically modify someone or something, for example, to get rid of known genes like Alzheimer's. I know that is something that has been tested and trialed at the moment, but it's definitely not something that I am comfortable working with, and a lot of people in our space aren't comfortable in working with either.
That's so interesting how you brought up, you know, something like designer babies, because I ethically, I don't know how if I agree with that as well. Like, I think it should just be a natural process. You shouldn't be able to pick what kind of baby's hair or eye color or skin color it should have. That to me sounds
Yeah.
sounds a bit questionable. But why do you think people are scared about, when you say that you are altering DNA? Why do you think there's such, I don't know, like, negative feeling about that? Like, why is there such fear, or where did that come from, you think, Claudia?
Well, it's to say it simply playing God. It's creating something that's deemed unnatural, and I completely understand that. It's I bring up the designer baby because when people think GMO, they either think genetically modified foods or they think genetically modified humans. And when I've done talks to the public, it's the first thing that comes up in conversation about, hey, is this a thing? Is this real? Can you do this? So I think it's really important to be transparent and open that it is something that people probably are working on, but a lot of people don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, I think science goes all realms, and and I think what you're doing is important, and yeah, and it's quite interesting how there's always these type of arguments, isn't it? And you can do it for good or you can do it for bad, and I hope we have a lot more people doing it for good, rather than for bad. And I think, and yeah, and I think maybe that's why there's always that kind of fear that and you're rightly so. It's probably because of that playing God type of ability, I would say. So, okay, so let's go back to you because I think you're a fairly interesting person. And, you were previously a co founder of a startup, and you were also pursuing a PhD at the same time. And I need to know if you're a bit crazy or a bit sleep deprived, or because, both these things are very hard. And how did you manage to juggle both work and studies at the same time?
I'm fueled by passion and coffee. Yeah. So I don't know how I stumbled into this mess, but I started a biotech company and my PhD at the exact same time. And I think it has shaped the way that I research and I communicate my research now. I'm really grateful to have gone through the experience of starting a biotech company because it's given me the ability to be able to communicate my research and find a gap even in why research gets stuck in a lab, for example, for so long and why no one ever sees it. So I guess fueled by maybe crazy, but yeah, definitely fueled by passion.
Oh, I don't think you're that crazy, so I think you're okay there. No, I feel for you because I, studied part-time for 3 years whilst I was working full-time, and I tell you what, when I finished my master's was probably one of the happiest days of my life because it was so hard, like, every single weekend, after work, like, you're just constantly needing to work, and then you need to study, and then you gotta do assignments, and then you gotta do group work, and it was really hard. I don't even know how you did a PhD. I was just doing my master's, so it was really hard.
Yeah, it's not done yet. I'm still got a little bit to go.
You still got more to go. So can you tell me what piqued your interest? You're a scientist. Why did you also wanted to become an entrepreneur?
I never wanted to become an entrepreneur, to be upfront. It just kind of happened. And the way that I fell into it was basically I was pushed into a program called CSIRO on Accelerate, and I fell in hard. Basically, on our first day, we got put in a room with investors and venture capitalists, and I was trying to explain my science, and I remember this guy turning around and he goes, "Don't use the word assay. I don't know what that is. Talk to me like I'm a human." Like, and to me, I was like, oh God, I'm not supposed to be here. And the acronyms that they use, it's like it's like a whole different world. But then going through all of that again, like as I said before, I seen a gap and I was like, I have the ability to create a platform and bridge industry and research together and help share my experience between the two of them and, try and get people more engaged because I think it's a really important subject.
Yeah, and look at you now, like, I think you can communicate very, very well. So can you, like, you mentioned about the CSR on program. It's a research commercialization program. Can you tell us more about some of the biggest lessons or key takeaways that you came? Is this something that you recommend for other scientists or researchers as well? Like in terms of how they can better explain what their research is? Because I tell you what, it's really hard to explain complex things, isn't it?
Yeah, I am so grateful for this program. Being a rural girly, I've never even I went to Sydney for the first time. I got to travel around and meet a whole bunch of people all over Australia that I never would have had the opportunity to do, and I'm so grateful for that. But the biggest learnings out of that is how to communicate, how to turn scientific insights into practical solutions and have a voice in shaping our future. They taught me how to speak the language of industry, customers, and investors. Something 2 years ago I would have went, no, thank you. That sounds boring as hell. So I'm very grateful that I was given the opportunity to, be uncomfortable and put myself out there and engage with people who probably are on the other side of the spectrum to what I do.
Yeah. And how did you push through that uncomfortableness, I guess? Because you talked about how you were kind of pushed into this direction. How did you start swimming and then, start doing laps around the pool as well?
Being uncomfortable kind of became my superpower. So, a lot of the advisors would probably say that I was the dark horse. I was very, very quiet and I didn't engage very much in the beginning. It was really hard for me because a lot of people in that room were professors that I've respected that have decades of life experience and research on top of me. So, being kind of put on the same level as them took me a little while to realize, hey, we're all people, we're all human, and we're learning at the exact same time. So, being given a voice and being able to use being uncomfortable as a way to become comfortable was, that became my superpower and my ability to do all these things.
Yeah, no, I love that so much. Like, it's really hard to be uncomfortable, isn't it? Like, some people just don't know how to process that. But I love how you manage to push through that uncomfortableness and then, you excelling on the other side. What other advice would you give to other scientists or entrepreneurs? Especially, I think, you described yourself as a rural girly. I love to hear more what you think other rural girlies should do as well.
Well, I guess coming from, an off grid property, living on the land, you know systems, you know patience, and you know persistence. Don't wait for permission. Science and entrepreneurship need your voice and your opinions. Not being in the city where everything is within your grasp and having to travel or grow your own food or use the sun to make your electricity or heat up your water. Those are all key things and skills that will help you when you do go into the city or you do start talking on larger stages. It's like your background is your superpower. No one else can take that away from you. Your experiences are your own and they can be used to support and propel you forward.
And I agree with that there. And I think from every single one of our experience and background shapes the way we are. And I think that is our superpower and that what makes us so unique, and I agree with you. I think it's really important to kind of take what you have and then use skills like communications to be able to story tell that into whatever direction you want to go into, which I think is a really important skill. So, this podcast features a lot about emerging tech career pathways. And, I think you and I both agree that communication is a very important skill. Which other skills do you think you require to be able to succeed in a ever-changing industry and world?
I guess I probably sound like a broken record here, but adaptability and critical thinkings, being able to sink or swim is a massive advantage. And I don't think people realize that being nervous is such a good thing. If you go into an interview not nervous, I think you're likely going to flop because if you go in there stone face, like, yeah, I know everything I'm doing, people don't like that. People like it when you show that you're also human and you also have things that make you uncomfortable or may disadvantage you. Yeah, adaptability, critical thinking, and again, communication. Tech changes and will continue to change, but your ability to learn, question, and connect ideas will always be valuable.
Mm. I agree with you there. I love how you talked about being nervous is actually a good thing because it shows that you care. And I know that, in front of a big moment, I think all of us are naturally nervous. How do you get over your nerves? Are you like doing Wonder Woman poses in the bathroom or what are you doing to get over your nerves?
So at the end of CSIRO on Accelerate, there is a final showcase where you're put on a stage in front of hundreds of people to give a 3-minute pitch. This is the first time I've ever spoken, I guess, about my company and not speak as a scientist, and I was so scared. So my coping mechanism was singing Baby Shark to the point that everyone else was like, if you sing that when you walk on stage, I'm also going to sing it when you walk on stage. So just, that was grounding to me, singing a little tune in my head or trying not to overcomplicate it. So I knew that if I practiced my pitch, for example, too many times, I would have been so concerned about stumbling on words. I've done really well to speak on this podcast, for example, but I actually have a speech impediment that has taken a really long time to reteach myself to say words. And I get stuck and I stumble. And what I come to realize is no one is listening to that. They're only listening to, the full sentence. It's kind of like when you're reading a text message and you go back and read it 20 minutes later and you're like, oh, I actually didn't read that correctly because you're skimming. We kind of do that when we're listening as well. We kind of filter out the rubbish. So don't let things like a stutter or being nervous or quiet disadvantage you from speaking because it doesn't. It just gives you a personality and makes you human.
Yeah, I had no idea you had a stutter. Is that your speech impediment,
I
Claudia?
had a brain tumor. Oh god. I had a brain tumor removed during early COVID, and I had Bell's palsy for about 9 months. So I had to teach myself to say some words again. Microscope or microscopy. I can't say properly, as you could probably tell, but that just become part of my character, and it was a little bit annoying in the beginning because everyone would correct me, but I'm like, now they have to engage in conversation with me. So
Wow.
it kind of helped me in the end.
Yeah, to be honest, until you pointed that out, I didn't even really notice. You know what I mean? Like, I think, wow, I had no idea you had a brain tumor. My goodness, like, wow, your speech is perfect. Now knowing that, that's incredible. Wow.
I avoid the hard words. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. But, it's really interesting you mentioned that because, we kind of have to all adapt. And you talked about how adaptability is one of the key the, our key skills that for us to be able to be successful in this ever-changing world. And I love how you came through a brain tumor that you took out not even all that long ago by the sounds of it, and you kind of had to relearn how to speak. And look at you now, you're on a podcast and you are on stage in front of hundreds of people. Wow, Claudia, I'm so amazed. That is so impressive. So well done to you.
yeah, COVID helped. Back to when we was talking about studying online. Yeah, that also helped because if it wasn't for COVID, I probably never would have finished my degree, and I probably never would have been sitting here today, which is such a weird thing to be grateful for.
Hey, you know what? You gotta be grateful for whatever things happened. There's unfortunate things that happen and there's great things that happened. And I think obviously that happens for a reason that they wanted you to finish that degree and then start your PhD, which is what you're doing now. So that's so incredible. I'd love to hear your emerging technologies that you are most excited about for the future. What excites you?
Synthetic biology as a whole, but my biggest thing that I'm excited for, I guess, is bio-based materials. So using microbes to create things like packaging, for example, is really exciting. And clothes even and new textiles, like it's almost here. It is something that everyone or a lot of people are working on, and I'm excited to start seeing them pop up in market.
Yeah. Wow. So can you explain that a little bit more? Like, what is synthetic materials? What would that look like, etc.?
Yeah, a great example is, I guess, A lot of people know what kombucha is, for example. A lot of people know what a SCOBY is, which is the bit of
No,
meat. You don't know what a SCOBY is? So SCOBY
no.
is the meat that sits on top of a kombucha, I guess. A lot of people in COVID as well, sourdough, got into kombuchas. That is made up of a material called cellulose. That material is also the same thing that makes trees stand up straight. There are organisms that can create that, like they do in a kombucha, for example, and that can be harnessed to make textiles, rope, and any other sort of material like packaging. It's really cool.
Wow. That's amazing. So we're using nature to create new materials, basically.
Yeah, as probably said earlier, everything in nature can be made by nature. So we're just running with that now.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a whole circular economy, isn't it? So, so what's the most surprising or quirky thing you've learnt about yeast during your career? Tell
Yeah,
us a fun fact.
Yeah, when I thought about this, I wanted something that people would go, "Oh," and I guess a quirky yeast fact is that some organisms of yeast are good at sticking together. This is a process called flocculation. So basically, they clump together after fermentation, so after you brew a beer, and either rise to the surface or sink to the bottom of a fermenter. This makes it easy for them to remove from the beer. So this is really important in brewing where it helps clarify the finished product. But a lot of people don't realize is that yeast do that naturally in nature. Say they're trapped in a bit of stagnant water, they will either sink or rise to try and gather more oxygen or nutrients to feed themselves. They kind of make like a pontoon, I guess, to float or sink. It's really cool.
Wow. So I bet all the craft beer brewers in their house don't know what that's called. What's it
Yeah,
called again?
flocculation.
Flocculation.
Like a
Oh,
flock
interesting.
of birds, flocculation.
Oh, I'm gonna remember now. I'm gonna think about a flock of birds and, all the bubbles are now rising in a beer. So it's I've got one actually. I was actually doing some research for this. And in 2019, there was a sourdough bread that was baked from a 4,500-year-old Egyptian yeast. Did you hear about this? I'm sure you probably
Did.
know.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So Seamus Blakely, one of the founders of the Xbox video games, is a hardcore baker and Egyptologist, which I am so jealous of because I did ancient history and I love, ancient Egypt and I'd been to Egypt and love all that stuff. But he's also a gastro Egyptologist, so he loves the food from ancient Egypt and he decided to combine his hobbies. So with the assistance of a microbiologist, an archaeologist, and ancient baking expert, they extracted yeast from an ancient Egyptian pottery, and then he's cultivated the yeast over a week, and then grew a sourdough, that is from a 4,500-year-old Egyptian yeast, which I just thought was absolutely mind-boggling. Can you explain that a little bit more? Is that I didn't even know yeast can last that long or live that long.
Well, I guess you can think about it. I Jurassic Park comes to mind, and you know how there was a little bit of resin that went over a mosquito that bit a dinosaur, and they extracted the DNA from the mosquito and were able to create dinosaurs. I assume what would have happened if it's true is that they've found some sort of artifact that had remnants at the bottom of it. Because fermentation has been a thing that's been done for thousands of years, like thousands of years.
Mm.
So it doesn't surprise me. And yeast can survive when they're dried out. When you go to the shops, you buy a dehydrated yeast. So I assume that they've swabbed it for some weird reason, and this organism has popped out, and they're like, "Oh, let's see what we can do with it." It would have been really cool to be there the first time that they fermented it to see what it smelt like, or who was the first person to take a bite or a sip of uh, the outcome or the food that they made from it, because that's really scary.
Yeah, I know. Well, I was watching something on YouTube and the guy was like, "Oh, this is sweeter and rich." And I was like, "Wow." From a 4,500-year-old, Egyptian yeast. So and they were using ancient grains as well, which I thought mind-boggling, this, as you described, yeast being nature's powerhouse. I'm going to keep repeating that now. I think it's fantastic. It's so true. Final question, Claudia, how can others contact you to learn more?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the place to find people like me. My name is Claudia Bruinsma on there, and you will see me in my white lab coat as my profile picture. I'm always happy to talk about science and share my microscope photos. I have plenty, but yeah, LinkedIn is a great platform.
Well, thank you so much, Claudia, for joining us on Emerging Tech Unpacked. I absolutely loved learning more about yeast. I think it's a very understated topic and love learning about microbiology and also your inspiring journey from scientist to founder and how you overcame such difficulties, and I had no idea that you had a brain tumor, and now you're like learning to speak, and now look at you, you're on a podcast. So exciting. Very good luck with your PhD studies. I hope you go well there, and thank you so much for your time, Claudia.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Wow, what a conversation. I never knew we could produce so many things from yeast. Can you imagine having coffee in your car and the fuel in your car and the coffee packaging coming from the same organism? Yeast is truly nature's tiny powerhouse. I also loved hearing about Claudia's journey from a rural farming background to cutting edge research and entrepreneurship. She shows us the power of curiosity, adaptability, and resilience, proving that your unique experiences are your greatest asset, whether you're a scientist, a founder, or just someone who loves turning over rocks to see what's underneath. She reminded us that science and innovation thrive when we bridge traditional knowledge with modern technology and when we communicate openly and transparently, especially about the ethical challenges of genetic modification and biotechnology. So next time you enjoy a slice of sourdough or pour a pint of beer, remember, yeast isn't just a kitchen staple. It's a key player in the future of sustainability and innovation. And who knows, the next big breakthrough might be hiding in a rock pool, a tree log, or even in your own backyard. I'd like to extend a special thank you to the CSIRO On Innovation Program for their invaluable support. The On Innovation Program has played a pivotal role in helping researchers like Claudia to bridge the gap between academic discovery and real-world impact. Through hands-on learning, expert mentorship, and a vibrant network, the On Innovation Program empowers deep tech founders to turn innovative ideas into practical solutions that benefit society. We're grateful for their commitment to fostering Australia's next generation of science-driven entrepreneurs and for sponsoring this episode of Emerging Tech Unpacked. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving us a review, and sharing it with your friends and networks so they can enjoy it too. I would very much appreciate it if you can support our podcast with a monthly donation and join our community on patreon.com/Emerging Tech Unpacked so I can cover my podcast production expenses and keep this show and our important mission going. For more information about the latest episodes and how to contact us for sponsorship, promotion, and guest speaking collaborations, visit our website, emergingtechunpacked.com. We are available in audio format on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and you can also watch us on YouTube, and we have bonus video content there. Make sure to tap the notification bell so you will be informed of the latest episode drops. We are active on social media, so make sure to subscribe, like, and follow us on our social media channels, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, to stay updated with the latest news and content. To get in contact with me, you can find me on LinkedIn by searching for Lucy Lin or on my website, lucy-lin.com. We welcome all feedback and will be very grateful if you can help us grow and spread the word by forwarding this episode to a friend and giving us a 5-star review. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope I've unpacked the fascinating world of yeast for you on this microscopic adventure. My name is Lucy Lin, and thank you so much for listening to Emerging Tech Unpacked. Until next time, stay curious, stay adaptable, and keep looking for nature's hidden powerhouses all around you. See you in the next episode soon.